My name is Commander Ray Lockheart, United States Navy, Intelligence Division. On paper, I coordinate assets across oceans, sign off on classified reports that decide who lives to see morning. In my mother's mouth, I'm just the one who ran off in a uniform and never looked back. The first time I heard that version of me read out loud, it wasn't at a dinner table, it was in a courtroom. The air in there was stale and over-air conditioned, the kind of cold that creeps under your collar. I sat at the defense table in my dress blues, hands folded, posture straight from 2 decades of salutes and inspections. My mother sat in the front row, wearing black like she'd invented grief. No mascara runs, no shaking shoulders. Just carefully timed dabs at the corners of her eyes. Nathan, my older brother, was next to her, his wedding ring turned inward on his finger. He used to do the same thing with his class ring when he lied to our father about wrecking the truck. Elise, my little sister, the one I used to push on the tire swing until our hands blistered, she didn't look at me. Not once. She stared at a spot on the wall, just over my shoulder, as if eye contact counted as betrayal. They'd spent the morning painting a picture of me for the judge. The daughter who never called. The sister who never visited. The officer who missed her own father's funeral because, Your Honor, she simply didn't care. Lies, polished and rehearsed until they sounded like scripture. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel, gray hair and eyes to match, closed the folder in front of her. For a second, the entire room held its breath. Then she looked directly at me. Commander Lockheart, she said, every syllable clean and sharp. Would you care to respond? That one word hit my family harder than anything I would say next. Commander. Nathan's eyebrows pulled together, like he was translating a foreign language. Elise's jaw clenched. My mother's spine went rigid. For years they'd told people I worked with computers in some abstract government office. They'd shrunk my life down into something vague and unimportant. Now my rank was echoing off the wood, paneled walls. Before I opened my mouth, before I took back my name, I want you to understand how we got here. Because if you've ever been cut out of your own story, you'll recognize the steps long before the verdict. It started with a missed funeral. I was halfway around the world when my father's heart finally gave up. Not on deployment. This time I was stateside, in Norfolk. I found out the way strangers find out, an automated email from a newspaper obituary alert I'd forgotten I'd ever signed up for. I read his name twice before it landed. Henry James Lockheart, survived by his loving wife Evelyn and their 2 children, Nathan and Elise. 2 children. My coffee went cold in my hand. I scrolled down, looking for my name, thinking maybe I'd been listed separately, maybe someone had spelled it wrong, maybe there was another Ray Lockheart buried somewhere in Rowan County, but no. I just wasn't there. The funeral details were at the bottom. Saturday, 11:00 a.m., St. Michael's. I had 48 hours. I put in for emergency leave, grabbed my dress uniform, and slept on the red eye with my head against a window, smeared with fingerprints and old chewing gum, counting the minutes between turbulence and texting my CO updates like it was a mission. When I pulled into the church parking lot, the sun was already high. The lot was nearly empty, just a maintenance truck and a single sedan with nobody inside. The bells weren't ringing, no one stood outside smoking and pretending they hadn't been crying. I checked the time on my phone, 10:45 a.m. I was early. The main doors were locked. I circled around back, pushing on side entrances, knocking on the hall door where we used to sneak in for youth group pizza. Nothing. Finally, I found a groundskeeper hosing down the concrete near the rectory. "Excuse me," I said. "Is this St. Michael's?" He barely glanced up. "Yes, ma'am. Funeral for Henry Lockheart. 11 o'clock. He shut off the hose, squinting at me. "That was this morning." "This morning?" I repeated, because shock makes you stupid. "Yes, ma'am." Private service, 7 sharp. They were at the cemetery before 8. Family said they wanted it quiet. My tongue felt numb. The paper said 11. He shrugged like it wasn't his problem. It wasn't. My sit changed. I walked back to the rental car like my boots weighed 100 pounds. I sat there in full dress uniform, ribbons catching the sunlight through the windshield, and stared at the empty entrance. They'd buried my father before the sun came up. They'd buried him before I even landed. And they'd made sure I didn't know. I should have turned the car around and driven straight back to the base. But grief does something strange to the part of you that knows better. Instead, I drove home. The Lockhart property sits 20 minutes outside of town, past the last gas station, where the pavement gives up, and the gravel beats the underside of your car like it holds a grudge. 20 acres of red dirt and pine trees, weather, worn barns, and one white farmhouse that had needed repainting since I was 14. I parked under the pecan tree like I had 1,000 summers ago, only this time there was a rental barcode taped to the inside of the windshield, and I wasn't coming home for dinner. I shut off the engine and just sat there. Curtains moved in the front window. Shadows crossed the hallway. My hand hesitated on the door handle, not from fear, but from memory. You can spend years in war zones and still flinch harder at the thought of knocking on your mother's front door than walking into a hostile briefing. Finally, I stepped out. The porch steps still creaked in the same places. The swing on the far end of the veranda, where my father used to sit with his coffee, boots propped on the railing, hung motionless. I knocked. Elise answered. She was still pretty in that practiced, carefully curated way, nails done, lipstick perfect even on a day she should have been blotchy and raw. Her eyes traveled from my cover to my medals to my face, and for a second, I saw the kid version of her, the one who used to steal my boots and stomp around the house. Then the doorframe became a wall. "Oh," she said. "It's you." "I'm sorry, I missed the funeral," I said. The time was changed. No one told me. She leaned her shoulder against the frame, blocking the hallway behind her. "Yeah, well, Mom didn't think you'd actually come." "I'm here," I replied. I'd like to see her. What Elise's smile didn't touch her eyes. "She's resting. It's been a lot. This whole thing with the estate has her overwhelmed." "The estate," I echoed. A familiar voice cut through the air. "Who is it, Elise?" My mother appeared behind her, every hair in place, pearls at her throat like armor. Black suit, flawless posture. Widow, curated for an audience. Her gaze slid over my uniform, my ribbons, my bars, and landed on my face like I'd shown up covered in mud instead of polished brass. "Well," she said. "Look who decided we're worth a visit." It wasn't really a greeting, it was a verdict. "I came as soon as I heard," I said. "From the paper." She tilted her head. "You could have called." "I did," I said. No one picked up. The line was disconnected. Her expression didn't move. "We didn't have time to chase you down the way we used to." "You made your choice a long time ago, Ray. Navy first. Family somewhere down the list." I swallowed the words, clawing at my throat. In interrogation rooms, silence is a tool. In families like mine, it's a weapon. I just wanted to pay my respects. And I need to know what Dad decided. About the house. The land. Her eyes flickered. The first real crack in her calm. It was there and gone. "Your father was very clear," she said. "The estate goes to the children who were here. Who took care of him, you don't have to worry about any of it." "Was I mentioned in the will?" I asked. She hesitated barely a fraction of a second. No. Like a door shutting softly. I stood there in my uniform on the porch of the house I'd grown up in, looking at a woman who had given me my last name, and was now pretending I'd never worn it. I could have argued. I could have pushed past Elise. Instead, years of command training kicked in. You can't fight every battle at once. "Understood?" I said. "I won't keep you." I turned, walked back down the steps, feeling their eyes on my back like rifle sights. Just before I reached the car, my mother called out, voice sugar, sweet and hollow. "Oh, and Ray." I stopped but didn't turn. "Don't make this ugly," she said. "Your father wouldn't have liked that." I didn't answer. I just got in the car and drove away, the reflection of the farmhouse shrinking in the rearview mirror. If the story had ended there, you wouldn't be hearing it. It didn't. Grief doesn't hit me like a wave, it hits like static. White noise that fills every empty space until you can't hear yourself think. I lay awake on the floral bedspread of a cheap roadside motel, dress blues hanging from the shower rod, staring at the ceiling fan as it wobbled in lazy circles, and listening to the traffic hum like distant artillery. Something was wrong. My father and I weren't close in the way TV dads and daughters are. We didn't do heart-to-heart talks over kitchen tables. We wrote letters. Short, sometimes clumsy, always honest. He wrote to me during my first deployment, asking what the ocean smelled like, and if the stars really were brighter out there. He signed each letter with a shaky sketch of an eagle, wings outstretched. When I made lieutenant, he sent a Polaroid of himself holding a small American flag in the yard, boots planted, grin wide. When I got pinned as commander, I mailed him a framed photo, me in uniform, him standing beside me in an old flannel he refused to retire. I never saw it anywhere in the house again. I figured Mom had redecorated. He wasn't perfect. He'd yelled, he'd cursed, he'd slammed doors. But he'd never tried to erase me. I kept replaying my mother's face when I asked about the will. The tiny flicker, that half-second glitch. By midnight, I was sitting at the little round motel table with my laptop open and every legal resource page my clearance allowed pulled up on the screen. There it was, probate filing. Public record. According to the document on my screen, my father's last will and testament had been executed 6 weeks before he died. Everything, house, land, accounts, went to my mother, and on her passing, to Nathan and Elise. There was no mention of an earlier will. No mention of me. No executor named, because according to the paperwork, there was nothing to manage. Just a clean handoff from the man who raised me to the family who'd already buried me. My cursor hovered over the screen. My gut said what my training always had. If something doesn't add up, assume it's because you're looking at a manipulated version. The next morning, I checked out, tossed my bag into the rental, and stopped at the gas station on the edge of town. The clerk behind the counter looked familiar in the way small, town faces do. "You're Henry's girl," he said as he rang up my coffee. "He talked about you, said you were in the Navy." Real proud, and my throat tightened. "Yeah," I said. "I was." "He had that nurse bring in a picture to show us last year." He paused. "You know, the one of you two, with all those colors on your chest." "Ribbons," I said automatically. "Medals." "Yeah, those." He bagged my coffee, frowned. "He ever get hold of you in the end? He came in here 6 times, asking us how to dial long distance on that old phone of his. Said your number kept bouncing. My fingers went cold around the cup. He was calling?" I said quietly. "Sure was," the clerk replied. Seemed real frustrated about it. "Did he leave anything? Ever ask you to pass a message along?" He shook his head. "No, Mom. Just talked about how you tracked storms for a living." He chuckled. "Said if anyone could find her way back home, it'd be you." I carried that sentence with me all the way back to Norfolk. 3 days later, the hospice nurse called. Her name was Maria. She sounded tired and careful, like someone who'd seen too much and learned to put her words in neat little boxes. "I'm sorry to bother you on your work line," she said. "Your father gave me this number. He said if anything ever seemed wrong, I should call you here." "Seemed wrong how?" I asked. She exhaled. "Your sister had me sign some paperwork about his will. Said it was just an update, that he'd wanted things simplified. But he'd already shown me something different before he got really bad." "What did he show you?" "A folder," she said. "Yellow? Beat up?" He had me help him find a notary and 2 witnesses. He was so proud that day. "Kept practicing your rank so he wouldn't mess it up in the document. He made me promise I wouldn't let anyone throw it away." Then my heart was pounding against my ribs. "Maria, do you still have it?" "I have a copy," she said. He mailed the original to a law office the Navy uses, something with JH in the name. He said if anything happened, they'd know what to do. She paused. "Your sister told me I was remembering wrong. That he hadn't been in his right mind." My training teaches me to stay calm during active threat. My voice was steady when I said, "Can you email it to me?" An hour later, the file hit my inbox. I opened it and saw my father's shaky handwriting at the bottom of a neatly typed page. My name was right there, spelled correctly for once. Ray Lockheart, followed by 3 words executor of estate. The house, the land, his accounts, all of it. Attached to the email was a scan of an envelope, addressed in the same familiar scrawl to the Naval Legal Service office in Norfolk, Virginia. Maria had added one line of her own name. He trusted you to finish what he started. If you've ever had your reality questioned so often you start to doubt your own memory, you'll understand what that file did to me. It wasn't about money. It was about proof. Proof that I hadn't imagined our connection. Proof that I hadn't simply wandered off and never looked back. Proof that someone had taken a pen to my life and tried to strike my name out. I called the judge office. They confirmed receipt of the original will. They'd been waiting for a family member to contact them. By the end of that week, I was sitting across from a civilian estate attorney whose office smelled like stale coffee and printer toner, sliding the 2 wills across his desk. He read in silence. First the neat, lawyerly one my sister's firm had filed. Then the slightly messy, notarized one my father had signed months earlier with Maria and 2 Navy officers standing by. When he finally looked up, his eyes were flat. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Commander," he said. "This is fraud. We filed a petition to contest the will, to reinstate the original, to challenge Alyssa's power of attorney. We requested phone records, bank statements, internal emails from the hospice, anything the court would allow. The paper trail told a story my family would never say out loud. 6 months before my father died, Elise had him sign a general power of attorney. Broad, sweeping. It was supposed to be for paying medical bills. Instead, within weeks, every major decision was running through her. She moved accounts. Hired a new lawyer from her boyfriend's firm. Quietly transferred small amounts of money into a joint account she shared with Nathan. Sold my father's tractor to a friend for a fraction of its value. The phone logs showed dozens of outgoing calls from my father's number to a line that was 1 digit off from mine. Close enough that if you weren't looking too hard, you'd think it was just a mistake. Except it wasn't my number. It never had been. Someone had edited my contact in his phone. The same month the new will was signed, the obituary template for my father was drafted. My name was there in the early version. By the time it went to print, it was gone. The funeral paperwork listed, private family service, time TBD. The final entry, changed 2 days before he died, said 700 a.m. The public notice never got updated. If you lay those pieces down in a line, the pattern is clear. It wasn't that they forgot to include me. They made sure not to. I'd been gathering intelligence my whole adult life. This was just another operation. Only this time, the enemy lines were drawn through my own last name. So when the hearing day came, and I walked back into that small, town courthouse, I didn't feel like a lost daughter crashing a family gathering. I felt like an officer walking into a debrief with the truth in my briefcase. The opposing counsel went first. He was polished in the way of men who are used to being the loudest voice in any room. He called me Ms. Lockhart. At first, then visibly corrected himself when he saw the judge's eyebrows rise. Suddenly I became Commander. But only when he was quoting documents he couldn't ignore. He painted a picture of me that would have played well in a Sunday potluck line. The ambitious daughter who turned her back on home. Who chose career over kin. Who missed birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. Who didn't attend her father's funeral, and then showed up, conveniently, when there was property on the line. My mother dabbed at her eyes right on cue. Nathan stared at the table. Elise looked like she was absorbing every second of it, chin lifted, as if each accusation confirmed the story she'd told herself. Then my attorney stood. We didn't started with the wills. We started with the calls. Pages of phone records were entered into evidence. Outgoing calls from my father's number to that wrong, but close contact, over and over, at all hours. Maria's testimony about him complaining, insisting my phone must be broken. The clerk's account of him asking how to dial long distance while Elise sat in the parking lot scrolling through her own phone. Then came the emails. Screenshots of care packages I'd mailed home, tracking numbers, delivery confirmations with my mother's signature. Bank records showing a check I'd sent for Nathan's wedding that had been deposited into Elise's personal account, text logs from my old phone number with unanswered messages to Mom, some of them so short and tentative it hurt to read them aloud. Hey, Dad told me about the biopsy. How are you holding up? Tried to call? Line went straight to voicemail. Call me when you can. I can come home if you need me. No responses, ever. Then the wills. The original dated, notarized, witnessed by 2 Navy officers who'd submitted sworn statements and appeared by video. My father's signature at the bottom, uneven but deliberate. The revised version executed later, after Elise's power of attorney kicked in. Different lawyer. Different witnesses. The signature looked similar at first glance, but the handwriting expert walked the court through the differences. The inconsistent pressure, the rushed strokes, the spots where the pen lifted unnaturally. And lastly, the video. I hadn't known it existed until 2 days before court, when Maria called my attorney in tears. He wanted to leave something in his own voice, she'd said, just in case anyone ever argued about what he really meant. She'd filmed it on an old tablet, hands shaking, sitting across from him on the back porch. He looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a blanket despite the summer heat, oxygen tubing curling around ears that used to burn red when he'd worked out in the fields. The judge dimmed the lights a fraction. The clerk hit play. My father's face filled the screen. If you're watching this, he began, voice rough with both age and effort. It means I'm not around to argue with you in person. So this'll have to do. He adjusted his grip on the armrest, looked straight into the camera like it was another person. My name is Henry James Lockhart. I'm of sound mind, at least as sound as an old man can be. And I want it on record that my daughter, Commander Ray Lockheart, called Ray she's part of this family. No matter what anybody else says. He coughed, waved Maria off when she moved closer with a tissue. She left home to serve, not to run. I didn't always understand her, but I was always proud. This land, this house, they're supposed to be hers when I'm gone. Not because she needs it, because it's the only way I know to say thank you for carrying our name into the world and making it stand for something decent. He paused, eyes shining with something I didn't have a name for. If anyone tries to say I cut her out, they're lying. Or they made me sign something when I wasn't clear. Either way, this is what I want. Ray, if you're hearing this, kiddo, don't let them write you out. You hear me? The video froze on his face, weathered and stubborn, the porch swing creaking softly in the background. The silence that followed was different from the earlier kind. This silence had weight. That's when the judge looked at me and said, Commander Lockhart, would you care to respond? I stood. In uniform, you learn how to occupy space without apology. I squared my shoulders, hands at my sides, and let the room take in exactly who they'd tried to erase. My name is Commander Ray Lockheart, I said. I've spent the last 20 years serving this country. I've missed more holidays than I can count. I've watched fireworks from the deck of a carrier instead of my parents' backyard. I've read my family's news in delayed emails because satellites were busy moving more important things than my feelings. I glanced at my mother, at Nathan, at Elise, then back at the judge. I didn't miss my father's life. I continued. I called. I wrote. I sent what I could when I could. I stayed away when I was told he was too tired for visitors, even when my instincts told me that wasn't the whole truth. I inhaled slowly. I showed up for his funeral at the time the obituary gave me, in full uniform, ready to stand in the back and not make a scene. The service had been moved to 7 in the morning without anyone telling me. That's not neglect, Your Honor. That's exclusion. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My father wasn't a perfect man. Neither am I a perfect daughter. But he made his wishes clear, in writing, in front of witnesses, and on that video. Those wishes didn't vanish because it was inconvenient for the people who controlled his medications and his phone. I folded my hands behind my back, the way I do at briefings. I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here because a man I loved asked me, in the only way he knew how, not to let anyone rewrite his last decision. That's all. The judge watched me for a long beat. Then she nodded once. Thank you, Commander. You may sit. The ruling came that afternoon. Judge Harlow didn't draw it out. She reviewed the evidence one more time for the record, then looked over her glasses at my family. This court finds, she said, that the later will presented by the respondents is invalid, the product of undue influence, and, in parts, clear fraud. She turned to me. The original, notarized will executed on March 14th, naming Commander Ray Lockheart as executor and primary heir to the real property, is hereby reinstated. My lungs finally remembered how to work. The matter of potential criminal charges for document tampering and financial exploitation will be referred to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office for review. She added, This hearing is concluded. My mother shot to her feet. This is an insult, she snapped. She abandoned us. I took care of him. She's been gone for years and walks in here like she earned any of this. Mrs. Lockhart, the judge said, voice flat. Sit down or you will be removed from this courtroom. And Nathan put a hand on her arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. Alyssa's face had gone ashy, lipstick standing out too bright against suddenly bloodless skin. I didn't look away. You can't force people to see you. But you can make it impossible for them to pretend you don't exist. Outside, a couple of local reporters with cameras waited, sniffing around for a headline about the Navy officer versus small town family. I walked past the microphones like they weren't there. This wasn't a story for them. Not yet. On the courthouse steps, I heard my name. Ray! I turned. Elise was hurrying down the stairs, heels slipping on the stone. Nathan hung back with my mother, who stood half a step behind him, a queen dethroned. You think this makes you some kind of hero? Elise hissed when she reached me. You weren't here. I was. I cleaned up his messes. I took him to appointments. You have no idea what it was like. You're right, I said quietly. I don't know what it was like for you. You never let me. She flinched, but barreled on. He needed me. We needed what he left. You have your career, your benefits, your Navy paycheck. You don't need this land. I studied her face, the familiar tilt of her chin when she felt cornered. This land isn't a prize, I said. It's what he chose to leave me. You decided that choice didn't matter. That's the problem. Her eyes flashed. I did what I had to. He was confused. You weren't around. Someone had to make decisions. You did more than make decisions, I replied. You changed his contact list so his calls never reached me. You shifted funeral times so I couldn't be there. That wasn't about protecting him. That was about controlling the story. Her lips pressed together. For just a second, regret cracked through the anger. Then she turned it into armor. You don't deserve any of this, she said, voice low. You walked away from us when you put that uniform on. I met her gaze steadily. No, I said. I walked toward something bigger than us. You're the one who decided that meant I didn't count anymore. And Nathan caught up, my mother at his elbow. Let's go, Mom barked, voice sharp. We're done here. She walked past me without a glance. Nathan hesitated, half a heartbeat, eyes flicking from my face to my uniform to the parking lot. Then he followed her. There are people you spend your whole life trying to please, only to discover at the end that they were grading a test you were never meant to pass. I didn't chase them. The first time I unlocked the door to the farmhouse as its legal owner, the house smelled the same. Dust, lemon oil, and old wood. The light through the front windows painted familiar rectangles on the floor. It felt like walking into a memory that had been stuck on pause. In the attic, behind boxes of Christmas decorations and mildewed camping gear, I found a battered cardboard box with 3 letters on the top in black marker, RLL. Inside were the pieces of me my father had kept when everyone else was pretending I'd vanished. My acceptance letter to the Naval Academy Prep School. A faded newspaper clipping from my first commendation. The photo I'd mailed him of my promotion to commander. Creased at the corners like someone had picked it up over and over. Crayon drawings from when I was 8, labeled in my childish handwriting, Daddy and Ray fixing the fence. At the very bottom was a stack of unsent letters. Each was addressed to me in his uneven scrawl, stamped, never mailed. Most of them were simple. Ray, the doctor says I have to stop sneaking salt. Your mother is on patrol. Send backup. Got those photos from your ship. You look too thin. Eat something that isn't dehydrated, would you? Heard from the neighbor that you flew over on some big gray boat. I don't understand half of what you do, but I brag about you anyway. The last one was different. Longer. The date at the top was 3 months before he died. Ray, they changed your number in my phone and said you'd sent a new one in an email, but that didn't sound like you. I've had the hospice girl helping me figure things out. If this ever reaches you late, just know I tried. I'm tired, kiddo. Tired in my bones. But I saw that photo of you at your ceremony. My girl, a commander. I don't have the words for what that feels like, so all I can say is I'm proud enough to burst. I'm leaving the house and land to you. Elise and Nathan won't like it. Maybe they'll find ways around it. But I know you'll do something with this place besides let it rot. You always did like fixing broken things. Don't let anyone tell you you're not part of this family. Blood doesn't get to vote you out. Still proud, still watching. Dad, I sat there in the dust and dim light, his words blurring as tears I'd refused in court finally carved their way down my face. They hadn't erased me. Not completely. They just tried to throw a tarp over the parts they didn't like. But the thing about truth is, it has a way of seeping through whatever you bury it under. 6 months later, the Lockhart property didn't look like the past anymore. The barn had new doors. The southern field, once overgrown with weeds, was carved into small, neat garden plots. A simple wooden sign by the driveway read LOFKA Shiar Transitional Retreat for Women Veterans, no big logo, no patriotic slogans. Just the name and a gravel road leading to something that didn't exist when I was a kid, a place where women like me could land when the military spit them back into civilian life with a DD-24 tune and a head full of noise. We kept it small on purpose. A handful of rooms, a kitchen table big enough for 6, a circle of mismatched chairs under the pecan tree where we held evening check-ins. Some of the women had seen combat. Some hadn't. All of them had been told, in one way or another, that they were too much. Or not enough. For the families they came from, I didn't put my rank on the brochure. I didn't put my story on the website. This place wasn't about my courtroom victory. It was about rewriting what coming home could mean. On foggy mornings, I'd walk the boundary lines of the property with whoever felt up to it, pointing out where my father used to mark off new fence lines. We'd talk about things people don't put on motivational posters. Quiet panic attacks in grocery store aisles. The way holidays feel like tests you're doomed to fail. The H of being a stranger in rooms that share your last name. Sometimes I thought about reaching out to Nathan. Sometimes I reread the 3 unanswered emails he'd sent after the verdict, full of half excuses and questions he wasn't brave enough to say out loud. I never hit reply. Some bridges aren't burned. They were never structurally sound to begin with. Then, one gray October morning, I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I was on the porch, coffee cooling in my hands, watching the fog lift off the field. A small figure emerged, skinny, backpack too big, hair in 2 messy braids. She stopped at the bottom of the steps, clutching something to her chest. "You Ray Lockheart?" she asked. Her accent was my accent, only 10 years fresher. There were freckles across her nose, a touch of my father's stubborn line in her jaw. "Yes," I said slowly. "I am." She nodded once, like she'd confirmed coordinates. "I'm Ava," she said. "My mom's name is Elise." The world tilted, just a little. Up close, I could see she was holding an old photograph. The one of me and my father at my promotion. The frame cracked, glass missing. "She doesn't know I'm here," Ava added quickly. Grandma was asleep. I took her car key and walked when the road got too scary. "How'd you find this place?" I asked. She shrugged one shoulder. "Grandma's been yelling about it for months. Said you turned the farm into some charity for broken soldiers." She glanced at the sign. "I think it looks nice." I swallowed a laugh that was too close to a sob. "And why did you want to come, Ava?" She looked down at the photo, tracing my father's outline with one finger. "Mom keeps this in her drawer," she said. Sometimes I hear her crying at night. She says you ruined everything. But she also said once that you're like me. Too loud, too stubborn, always asking why instead of just doing what you're told. She raised her eyes to mine. They were Elise's color, my father's shape. Do you really help people who've been gone a long time? She asked. People who come back different and don't fit right anymore. The question landed somewhere deep and old inside me. We try, I said. We help people who are ready to figure out what their life looks like now. Even if it's messy. Even if it doesn't make sense to the people they came from. She considered that, chewing on the inside of her cheek. Mom says I should stop asking about you, she admitted. But I can't. It's like, there's this whole story nobody will tell me, and I'm just supposed to pretend I don't notice. She lifted the photo a little higher. He looks happy with you. Grandpa, he was? I said quietly, at least that day. The porch boards were cool under my boots. The air smelled like wet earth and coffee and something like possibility. I moved aside, pushing the screen door open with my shoulder. Come on in, I said. We've got pancakes on the stove and a rule that no question is off limits before noon. She hesitated only a second, then climbed the steps and crossed the threshold, the picture still clutched between us like a shared secret. As the door clicked shut behind her, the house felt different. For years, I'd fought to be seen by the people who'd built their comfort on my absence. I'd dragged my truth into rooms where it was never going to be welcome, begging for a version of family that only existed in my imagination. Standing there with Iva in my father's kitchen, listening to the quiet murmur of women's voices from the living room, and the sizzle of batter on the griddle, I realized something. I hadn't just won a lawsuit. I'd changed the ending. Legacy isn't about whose name gets listed in the obituary. It's about what grows in the soil they tried to salt. They edited me out of their story. So I wrote a better one.